everyone. This is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy. Be sure to check out our blog and our YouTube channel. Our great sponsors, Your Dolce Vita, Italy Rooting, and Abiativo Casa. And very excited today because my guest is one of my brothers from the Italian American Association from Ocean Township. And so welcome, Chris. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Bob, for having me on.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Exciting for me to have one of the guys from the club to be on. So, my first question is, why and when did you start doing your research?
So I think the spark was, one of either my niece or nephew had a family tree, project or something, when they were little. And then that kind of sparked, well, what goes back further? Usually that's parents, grandparents, and then luckily at the time, when it hit the interest, my grandparents were still around that I could really ask them the questions about, who and where and all that stuff. So, before I really dug deep, I was able to ask about towns and things and, and parents' names and things like that. So that, that was probably about 15 years ago I started doing all that.
Yeah, and that's kind of about when I started. Unfortunately, I didn't. My grandparents were no longer around. My father was already gone. But that's what I tell everybody. That's the place to start is with the grandparents. If you can, or older uncles and things like that. Um, so where did they come from in Italy?
So, my father's side, my grandfather's parents were both from Tremonti, which is right in the mountain off of the coast, the Amalfi Coast. And then my nana's father was from Tremonti, but her mother was from Pietro da Fusi in Avellino, which was kind of close. It's actually closer to Benevento than. And then on my mother's side, my grandfather's father is from Salerno, the city Salerno, and his mother is from Sessa Aurunca in Caserta. And my mom's mother is not Italian. She was English German. So, but I have actually stuff that goes back on that side. And then actually her mother passed away when she was young, when she was 13. So my grandfather remarried an Italian woman, and that was the grandmother that I knew. And her family was from Maddaloni in Caserta.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I interviewed somebody from Tremonti, probably 2 years, maybe more. So yeah, it's I'm starting to get to the point where I'm interviewing people that from the same places now. So it's
Yeah.
pretty interesting. Uh,
Well, you'll
um,
find if it depends on who. Well, you'll find some if you get enough people in the association. There's a number of people that Asbury Park was an enclave for people from Tremonti. So there's a lot of people in Ocean Township and in the area that were from Tremonti and in those areas.
oh, really? I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
interesting. That's very interesting. Well, that's kind of the way it went, right? They kind of gravitated towards the same place. Um, you know, Interestingly enough, my mother's cousins, they live about 3 blocks from us here in Bradley Beach, and they've been here for, geez, I guess they're in the 90s. So I guess in their 60, 70 years, they've been coming down here. And I think they started as a summer thing. Uh, and then they wound up, getting married down here and staying down here. But it's unfortunate. My mom had passed away just before we got here, so she didn't get to hang out with us with our cousins and things like that. But yeah, I didn't realize that there was so many people from Tremonti here.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, actually, my grandfather when they moved from Asbury Park, they went to Bradley Beach. The grandfather grew up in Bradley Beach.
so now you started this. So I guess you were helping your niece. Yeah, is that what happened?
Well, that kind of sparked the interest. I mean, for that, it was, your parents, your grandparents, at a young age, they don't really get too far back. But, started asking the questions and I got to like my grandparents, maybe my great grandparents' names. And then that's kind of like the standstill I was at for a long time, you know, like, I didn't think I would ever get past my great grandparents, names. And then um even even doing the research online on like ancestry and all that. I always figured, what, I'm gonna have to go someday. I'm gonna have to go to Italy and do research if I want to learn further past that, and that's kind of where I stood for a while, and I just kind of developed, family trees to that level for a long time, and looking up articles and newspaper stuff and all that.
Yeah, I was lucky with my mom's family because they're from a small town in Puglia, Torito, and it must have been one of the first places where they started, photographing the records because I found everybody. I mean, the whole town is in there.
Yeah.
Uh, my dad's family, they're from in and around Naples, which is much tougher because there's just so many more people there. Um, but now I know because you've showed me, you have like a massive chart now, yeah?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean the big step was well, on Ancestry, one of like my nana's cousin's daughter, so I guess it would be like my dad's second cousin, contacted me, about my tree that I have. And she she's like, "Oh, well, do you have, this information?" And I guess one of my dad's cousins and aunt that did some more research on their side of the family and on my nana's side of the family. And, "Oh, did you know that there's, we still have family over there?" And I was saying, I was the question, no, I didn't know any of this. So she sent me the stuff that she had, which went, a step further past my great grandfather into, his father and mother and all their kids. And there was like 13, my great grandfather is one of 13, and six like youngest brothers all came here. The oldest had the land, the girls got married off, and the younger brothers all came here and they all started landscaping businesses and in and around Asbury Park. And then, what happened was, I had the kind of two names of people that were in Italy. And she said, well, this gentleman's a professor. He may or not respond to you, but this woman, she's on it, social media stuff, and she loves to meet, new family and stuff like that. So I sent her a message and ended up, contacting with her, and it just kind of sparked from there. Learning more about that side. So it was pretty good.
Yeah, and it only takes that one person to find over there that's, doing it because they don't do a lot of it over there. But if you're lucky, you get to find that person that'll help you with some of the family and stuff like that. Now, have you been back yet, or you haven't been able to go yet?
Yeah, so we went in 2019. We went and visited we went and visited Tremonti. The story is funny. She actually came over, was going to the vacation in one of the islands and had a stopover in New York and had a cousin that had a restaurant there. So we were, well, when you're here, let's go, we'll meet you. So we went and met her for breakfast. We're like, well, we're in New York. Let's go. Let's get, and he had a pizzeria that was down, um, like St. Mark's, in New York. And we went, so we're like, well, while we're here, let's go stop by and, say hello, while we're up there. And he posted pictures on the Tremont, like a Tremonti Facebook page, with the names. Oh yeah, like the Tremonti consulate over here, and this is Christopher Francese. This is his family, and through that, another woman contacted me that she, well, who is your great grandfather? And then like between the back and forth, we figured out that our grandmothers were first cousins. Her great grandfather was an older brother of mine. And so that kind of sparked the interest, like, all right, well, I gotta go, we gotta go. Now that we've established two kind of contact points with people, so we have to go. So we planned a trip and got to meet them. It was fantastic.
Yeah. So what did you feel like when you got there?
Um I mean, I was a little bit nervous leading into it. I did some Italian classes. I did some italki with, to kind of brush up on speaking. I was a little concerned about the communication, but um, everybody there, and I'll tell you that, they always say a little standoffish with tourists or whatever. As soon as I said my name and like my family was from there, it was like the lost family came home. And then pretty much everybody, I felt like everybody was like that. It was like, I'd say my name, and they're like, "Oh yeah, welcome home." Yeah, it was just fantastic.
And everybody has that same experience. I've talked to people where they were just walking down the street, and somebody come up to them and say, they, of course, they know we're Americans. I mean, they know we don't belong there, right? But as
Right.
soon as they would say the name, they go running down the street and come with me and looking for people. They're so happy to see us.
We went to one, pizzeria. It was a distant cousin, the Pizzeria Vaccaro. That's some of the, you'll recognize some of that name, those names from the club. And they, so I explained who we were and who my great grandfather was, whatever. And there was, the older gentleman that was like the grandfather, father that I guess started it back in the, '60s, and like his son now runs the place. And then, gave me the wave, like, come with me, come with me, walked me up the street and points me to, a building. He said, Casa Vaccaro. And that was the house that my great great grandfather, they had lived upstairs, and he had like a cantina downstairs. So they had their vineyards and did whatever. And then he would serve, whatever humble food and wine in the cantina.
And
So
and you didn't know that when you didn't know that.
yeah, I had no idea,
Wow.
and any of that existed. It's run down, it's just basically a ruin at this point. Um, but that was that one story. And then when, we finally got the, chance to meet with the other woman that I said our grandmothers were first cousins. And it was unfortunate, like my nana that year was turning 100 and hers was turning 99. And she passed away like 2 weeks before we got her. So it was a little, it was a little bit of a bummer that we didn't get to meet her, maybe like do a call, and I would have loved to do something like that. Um, but we sat down, they met us, at this little like kiosk where you can get coffee and all that, and we went over like all the stuff we have, and then it was like another thing was like, okay, come on, get in the car. And and they just drove us all over the place, like meeting people, like whoever. Oh, okay, this is so and so. Oh, hey, this is so and so. And they just drove all around, and then they invited us over for dinner after that. Um, but it was like, oh, this is so and so, and this is so and so. Who was your, and it was, one of those kind of things. So it was fantastic.
You went with your kids, yeah?
My son was 3 at the time.
Oh, so he
Yeah,
was
so
real young. He was there,
yeah,
so
he
he
was a
was
little young, but I wanted to go, and then we'll go back again. Um, you know, Now he's gonna be 9 this year, so but we just wanted to go and do, at
Yeah,
least
our
get over
first
there.
our first trip, our son was with us like 20 years ago. He was one. And so obviously he doesn't remember, doesn't even know we went. But I didn't know any of this stuff now, and I wish I did, because we were in Sorrento, and I've told this story before. My father had told us that he had family in Torre del Greco, just outside of Naples. And but he didn't say who. I never knew anybody was. I didn't know who was there. And then 2 years ago, 2 years ago now, we were there, and it's depressing that I'm not there again. Uh, but I got to meet his first cousins that I never knew existed. It's just mind blowing, it really, really is. Um, so now you know, like, how many people you have in your chart now?
I mean, it's like between my family, my wife's side on there. I mean, it's well over 1,000 people in my full tree.
So
Um,
so did you find anything like, strange, unusual, crazy occupations, anything like that?
Nothing too crazy. Um, it's all, farm workers and, basically farmers. It's all up there, it's, grapes and chestnuts and lemons and things like that, that's that area. Um, what happened actually, you talk about serendipity, right? So the first woman that we had contacted with, that we met here, I asked her to recommend, what places to go to. And the first one she recommended was booked up. And she goes, "Oh, well, I have an old partner of mine that, his parents have a little, um, what do you call them? Agriturismo and wine, and wine." So I booked with them. And then, with discussing, what we're, doing research, I'm trying to learn about this and that. He used to work in the department, like the government, like the vital statistics, like so he had a book. I guess somebody had gotten with like the priests, and there was a guy, he went through all the records. So there's a big book that's like this thick, of all the family trees in Tremonti that go back, to the 1600s basically, and it'll tell you where that first person like came from, what town. So I had that book. So I mean, I was just flipping through, taking pictures of like everything I could think of, and to add on to that. And that, that's, I tried to get a copy of it from the from the town, but they wouldn't give me one. They gave me a history of Tremonti book, but but if we had gone to the first place, I never would have found out about that book, and so it worked. So he let me borrow. He goes, "Yeah, you keep those. And, when you leave, just bring them back." And I spent the whole time like going through, taking photos. I took hundreds of photos of all these books, and I was able now, on my dad's side, those three, you know um great grandparents, I can trace their lineages back to the 1600s. I know one came from Maori, one came from Cava di Terreni on the other side of the mountain. You know,
I mean, that's fantastic that they have that. That's
yeah.
incredible. Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
opened up a lot. I mean, that eliminated having to sit in the Hall of Records and do that
Yeah.
research for however long.
Yeah, that's amazing. I had a similar kind of thing. My second great grandmother was from from Switzerland, from Lucerne. And I was like, I'm never gonna find anything on this woman, how am I gonna find any? I can't, it's hard enough finding some of the Italian stuff. Um, but it was, on the internet one day, and I typed in, Swiss records or something like that. And this website popped up, and it said, if you have any questions about Swiss genealogy, or write us in English, German, or Italian. So I sent them an email, and I said, my great grandmother was Elisa Moore. My second great was Elisa Moore. Do have anything? You know anything? Well, they sent me a link to a website that, because she came from a well-known family, um, they had the records. They had the same thing, charts, like you had, genealogy charts for probably about 30 or so of the more prominent families in Lucerne. And I was able to get her lines back to like the 1300s, and all these hand-drawn charts,
Yeah.
so I mean, that's why I say there's no accidents, right? The one place was
Right.
closed, you pick another place and you find all this stuff. It's amazing. It's really amazing.
I
Uh,
mean, and that's the one thing I love about doing the research, is like you find that one little like hint, and then it just opens up a door, and then you can just run with it. It's you know
yeah, and I tell people, people get discouraged or something. I say, sometimes you take a break for a month or two, and you come back, and all of a sudden, that something pops up. So now, have you done your DNA?
I have. And so here's the tricky thing. Like I'm actually adopted.
Oh, my
So,
kids, my kids are adopted. Yeah.
so I mean, I always feel my family's my family. That's,
Sure, of
this is,
course.
when I talk about my family, it's my family. So, but I know from from paperwork that, that my, original name was an Italian name. So I know at least some part. So I did the DNA to see like, all right, let me see how much is Italian in there, actually, biologically, whatever it is. So I've done that, and I've kind of figured out the rough idea of where I'm from, biologically where I was from, but I haven't pursued it too much to try to contact people. I've through how doing research, like by doing so much research, I've done enough to figure out who's who where and where people came from. But I haven't really take that step to contact anybody.
Well, yeah, I know, and it's interesting with my kids. They knew from early on that they were adopted, and my daughter was crazy about finding the birth. I mean, she was bugging us from when she was 16. So I said, you have to wait
Mm.
till you're 18. We'll do it. So they've all, they both met their birth parents. My son wasn't interested, for many, many at all. And I used to say to him, if you ever, he wasn't interested. And then through Ancestry, his sister contacted me and said, Matthew's sister, and I'd like to meet him. And is it okay? And I said, well, he's a grown man. I said, I'll ask him. It's
Yeah.
up to him. And so he said, yeah. And, the interesting thing about my son, his father was Puerto Rican. My wife is half Puerto Rican. And they're like fifth cousins. And did you say your mom's family was um English and such, English and German, or was your grandmother?
Yeah, my mom's mother, and so with that one, so on Ancestry, with like looking up things. So I guess like her great grandfather died, and his brother remarried his wife, right? So and then had other kids after her grandfather. So from that line, I guess one of the people of her generation, whatever it was, did all the research and traced everything back to England and wherever. And so that goes back to like the 1600s for that side, and then so because of that, that guy, his work, I just piggybacked off, and he was like, yeah, use whatever, use whatever, if there's anything I need help with, you need help with, everybody that does research is pretty helpful, with each other. And that's one thing I've kind of learned is everybody's trying to help each other. Anything I have that you can use, go right for it.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. On my and my Facebook group now is I think almost 13,000. And everybody's so helpful, especially with translations and things like that. I tell people, uh, if you want to know something, or if you're looking for, family member, or you want a translation or whatever, just go into the Facebook group. There's so many people, willing to help out and share information and all of that kind of stuff. It is, I always say there's like, one, maybe two in each family that's got this crazy thing that they have to do all this searching.
Well, yeah, I mean, the one thing that kind of confused me a lot was my grandfather's mother, like I had her name was Ferrara, and then when I was looking back through trying to figure out, like, all right, well, what did she change her name, what was her maiden name, like I'm trying to figure that stuff out, and like so another part of it is my grandfather's father died. He died in the influenza epidemic in 1918. So when my grandfather was young, and she remarried like a second or third cousin that was Ferrara. So that like confused me. Once I figured that out, I go, and then like that, that was like, you know, and
Oh,
then one of my, back to the DNA, like I didn't find anything, but my mother did it. And so she had another extended, relative that was like her grandmother's brothers, family. And my grandfather, when I asked him, he told me, he's like, my father was from Salerno, my mother was from Caserta. And I'm like, and now once I did the research, I'm like, that could be, where is that? Like, what's the specific town name? Like, I don't know, like I didn't know if it was specifically, those towns. And I had the longest time trying to find stuff. And then she had posted some stuff and found the um the draft card for one of the kids that had the town name. And that just then that opened that opened doors for me. It's like little things like that. You guys, when you search for, you're doing your research and it's like, what am I looking for? And you go on that draft card and you see, and it's like Sorbello. I was like, and then so I started looking that up and I was like, oh, all right, there we go. Sorbello is like a part of Sessa Aurunca and Caserta, you know.
Well, yeah, and I had the same. Well, my father's family was the same kind of thing. They, they always said we were from Naples, right? Which everybody said. I mean, it's there's all these little towns around there. Um, but then I was told that he was from Caserta. He was born in Caserta, which okay, and it wasn't until I started, doing my citizenship thing that I got his birth certificate and found out he was actually born in Pagani. So, that's the hard part. The family, they just, say these things and nobody's really, really, positive about it. And the same thing with my grandmother. Uh, she was from another small little town, Circola, outside of Naples. Again, they always said that, they were born in Naples, but uh yeah, cracking some of those things gets like really, really hard. I mean, the good thing about, at least in Italy, the women don't change their names. So that's kind of makes it easier on that end as opposed to searching for American parents.
Yeah, I mean, one of the longest times I had researching through, what was, my grandfather's father, was from Salerno, and I was like, well, let me just start looking at Salerno, and then looking in like a city, looking through city records. I mean, I would go on Tremonti and look, and it'd be like, a couple, maybe 100 images of births or whatever, whatever it is. And then I go on Salerno and it's like 900 images that you're like, and hope, if there's no index, then you're going through every one. And a lot of them there, a lot of years there wasn't an index. So I'd just be like, and I know, the line where it has like the parent name or whatever. So I'd just be zoned right in on that, like clicking like next, 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 just looking for the name.
Yeah, well, that's like I said before. That's why I was so lucky with my mother's family, that everything was out there. And um we went there last year, and yeah, they gave us a whole tour of the town, and there was a lawyer there with uh he lives in what was the castle, right? And he brought us into his house, and you know showing us, so there was a plaque on the wall with all the Duke's names and stuff like that. Uh, they just so open and understanding about everything, and met the mayor and brought us into the town hall, and they took us for a car. I mean, just they couldn't do enough. It's really quite amazing. Uh, it really, really is. And you know, just everything in it. The food is the food, right? I mean, I always
Right.
bring this up
Yeah.
and everything. You can't describe it to people who've never been there.
Um,
As much as we try at the club, right, to make Italian food, it's
I
not still
know.
not the same.
Well, it's funny when they've invited us over for dinner. Um, it's like the cheese and meats and some arugula salads and whatever, and then it came out with like the pan with the freshly fried, the big sardines, the big anchovies or whatever, the elite, the real ones. I was like, okay, yeah, let's go for it. And then but then they come out with like the octopus, and I was like, I can't do it. I'm sorry, like it's not, you know. I was
Well,
like, I can't do
yeah,
it.
I'm not a real
Yeah.
big fish person, but we were in this town in Calabria called Sheila, and they had set us up in a fish restaurant. I was like, well, yeah, what am I gonna do? I gotta eat. And it was like the guy just, stuck a bucket out into the water and just picked this stuff up. That's how fresh it was. You wouldn't even know. And
Yeah.
and there's a place there. It's all they make is, well, they make other stuff, but they're known for their swordfish sandwiches.
Okay.
Um, and all it was like swordfish, olive oil, and lemon on a roll, and it was just blew you away, knocked your socks off.
Yeah.
You know, but when we went to my dad's cousins, same thing. They had made stuff for us. Um, but in the one town in Calabria where my great grandmother's or my grandmother's family comes from, uh, everything was made there. The cheese, the olive oil, the
Mm.
olives, the bread, the wine. There wasn't anything that was there that was, you know, came from a supermarket, right?
Right.
And I guess if you said you went to and had the pizza and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just phenomenal. I mean, I promised my wife if we go next year, you know, she wants to do. We did a couple of family trips. She wants to see, you know, Florence and Pisa and Milan and that stuff. So I said, okay, next time we'll go. We'll do the touristy kind of thing, you know.
Yeah. Um, the one, the other thing that, they, when like I mentioned, they gave me like the book, it's like a history of Tremonti. And then, that sparked, I found some other books, that have, for that region, for the history of that region. But, learning about the history of the area, some of the family history, like we, I mentioned, when we emailed that, you know, her grandmother was old enough to remember her grandfather, and so she could pass on stories of, you know, her grandfather to me, so of my great great grandfather, I could, so they were able to pass on that story. So I have, I have recordings. She's speaking in, Neapolitan and, they translated for me what she's talking about, and I can get some of it, but, they remembered stories of when my great grandfather went back to visit, and like how we know what an exciting, story, he was, dancing around, they had the brazier in the, in the cantina to keep, to keep your feet warm, your hands warm. He would dance around. They told me, he would play the tambourine, the tamborello, around the cantina. And so there's, I have a number of stories of now 4 generations ago that to pass on to other people about, they said, and one of the things that to take a step back, I listened to you on the Italian American podcast. One of the episodes that they've had in the past was, some of the stuff with the spiritual kind of stuff with the Madonnas and the, the devotions. And the stuff that touched me in a way that and then I found out going to visit that my great great grandfather, he was a devotee of the Madonna Montevergine and would go on a pilgrimage. He would walk from Tremonti to Montevergine and back. So I was like, to see those kind of things kind of come together, was a quite a thrill. Like I was like, wow, I never even thought of, that they would even, be, you know, that far away, like I mean, for now it's like an hour and a half driving, but for them to have to walk there or on a cart, that's a pilgrimage. I mean, that probably took weeks to do that. And so I have these stories now of my family and and what I had, from like I said, the woman that contacted me with originally the information, she had a photo of my great, Pasquale Vaccaro and his wife Maria, that they had never seen before. So they had never seen that photo. And I said, this is the photo that I have that they had. And then immediately they look at it, they go, oh, they go, yeah, he looks like so and so, and then oh yeah, he was tall. Like you could see that she's like clearly up on a stool or something because she's a lot short, but like yeah, oh yeah, he was very tall. Now I know he has blue eyes, like stuff like that. Like it's crazy to find out that kind of information. That like I said, I never would have thought I could find past my great grandparents that I knew that were here that came here.
Yeah, and and that's kind of what I figured when I first started. I figured, yeah, maybe I'll get to the great grandparents, maybe great great grandparents, if I'm lucky. Um, but I mean, my father's mother, is just, I'm back
Yeah.
8 centuries with her because of her roots, but it gets beyond just states and places, you know, when you start going through that stuff. And you know, next week I'm going to be interviewing somebody I interviewed before, Judy Wilkins Smith, who's um she's like I don't know, almost like a psychology genealogist or something like that. And you know, we've talked before about the physical traits of people, but you know, what's also passed down, which intrigues me, is um, you know, your psychological traits get passed down
Mhm.
too. And so, you know, we're going to be talking about that next week, and it should be real interesting because, like you mentioned, well, blue eyes, red hair, that kind of stuff. But um, what did you inherit from them that makes up the rest of you? How you think, how you act, how you integrate with people, and things like that. You know, I find that to be real fascinating. And my wife tells me all the time, I know where you get that from. You get it from your great, 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 great grandparents. You know?
You know, it's funny. I mean, even on sort of like gesture wise, you know, the one photo we have of my, you know, my grandfather's father is this, you know, army portrait of him probably 19 years old or whatever he was, you know, in Italy. And the way he's standing and the way he has his hand in a certain way. And like when we saw the photo, we found, you know, and we found it buried away in my nana's house. And it was like, your dad always holds his hand like that, you know, like he's always like doing some, you know, this like kind of like, you know, you see that and you see him like, you know, it's pretty wild.
I'll tell you, my wife's mother died um, when she was pretty. I guess she was about 68 or 69. Um, and um, my wife's niece, as she started to get older, she would have facial expressions and things and talk like my mother-in-law. And but she never, I mean, she never knew her.
Yeah.
It's weird, you know, it's really, really weird. So yeah, so that's kind of the thing, you know, what other kinds of things do we, you know, do we pick up from, you know, the people? And one of the things that Judy talks about is that you know, if you understand it, you could change it, you know. So if you've picked up something from somebody from 2 or 3 generations ago that you don't like, there's ways of changing it. So it should be, I think it should be, you know, pretty interesting conversation. Uh, but you know, even with handwriting, I have signatures of um so my dad's uh grandfather and great great grandfather. Uh and you could see a pattern in the handwriting, you know.
Yeah, I've been
Doesn't look
told a number of
exactly
times.
alike, but you could
Yeah.
see, you know, the way they
I've been
form
told a
certain
number of
letters.
times my writing's like my dad's writing. You know, it's
Yeah,
just
I
something
see.
that like, you know,
My handwriting is like, I don't know who, but my handwriting is like the guys when you get pull up the Italian record and you can't read it. That's what my handwriting is like. I don't have any of the ones that had good penmanship. I always get the guy who writes like me.
yeah. Well, I've you know, I went to school for art and I did a lot of stuff with calligraphy. So I like, you know, and I mean that's a different thing from your handwriting, you know, because I feel like that's more, you know, deliberate with what you're doing than when you're just scribbling. But
So well,
you know,
so let me ask you. So let me ask you
I
because
practice my handwriting.
I believe that you could you know, you could understand people's traits from their handwriting. What do you think?
Like how?
Well,
Like if they're more deliberate with what they're writing and
well, yeah,
or they're
whether
just
they have whether, you know, are they shy? Are they, you know, loud? Are they a leader? You know, that kind of stuff, you know, certain things like that.
there's certain things like, you know, you can see more expressive kind of like, you know, accents to things, you know, that when people are like a little more, you know, I guess outgoing and they're but
And the reason I ask is you know, kind of in Europe, they put a little bit more into that. They kind of America, not so much, but they look at handwriting analysis a little bit more. And I had a couple, I had someone who does that kind of thing. I forget the technical term for it now, but um, she analyzed um, a signature, and it was, I wouldn't say it was 100%, but it was pretty close to what that person's was like, you know.
Okay.
So yeah, it's an interesting kind of thing. I know a lot of people don't believe in it. I kind of
Yeah,
do
I mean,
myself.
yeah, I found that, I mean, you know, doing the calligraphy and, practicing handwriting in certain styles has helped. And that's helped me with deciphering documents, you know, and it's hard to explain to some people when they're like, "Oh, well, what do you think this is? What do you think that?" I'm like, that looks like a J, or that looks, like, that no, but you got to look at other documents. You're looking at your own. Well, flip through pages and look for what does an R look like on that, that's an R, or an S, or whatever it is. Like, is there some wild, and then some wild accents to things that they did 100 years ago that they don't do anymore. Like, for me specifically, it almost looked like a J. For Francis, it would be it, and then the S would come down real low on, like, and it almost looked like a J. Like, and so certain, like, names, like in, like, the town, like the village names and stuff like that. Like, so, like, in Tremonti, like, the Francis come from the village Corsano, and I would see it, but it looked like Corgiano, like with a J. But then I figured out, no, the S was like a hanging S down, and I was like, that's a really cool little, you know historical thing. I started kind of trying to do that, but then it just doesn't look right anymore. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe I'll do that, a little bit, and then it just doesn't quite look right anymore. That was the way they did it then, and it's gone past that now.
And they would abbreviate a lot too, when you start understanding how they abbreviate some of the names and stuff like that, like Maria, they would put MA period, right? Uh,
Right, and
and
and that's the other thing you gotta a lot of the female names are Maria something, whatever. It's always Maria first, and then their real name, Maria Christina, Maria whatever.
yeah, yeah, no, exactly. I have my mother's family. Uh, her uncle Dominic had four brothers before him named Dominic. So they all passed away. They passed away at once. So the next son that came along named Dominic. The next son came along, and I was going like, at first I was like, oh, all these Dominics. Then I realized they were all passing away, and I was like, geez, when do you
Yeah,
get
as
to the
children.
point? When do you
Yeah.
get to the point where you say maybe Dominic's not the right name for these kids?
Yeah, I came across that with Vincenzo on a couple. There was a couple, and then they just didn't make, neither of them made it, and you know,
Yeah, but they
yeah,
would they would stick with it. They would really stick with it. It's really really quite amazing.
to go back through and see, like, the naming tradition, for my, my dad was Carl, and my grandfather was Americanized to Sam, but his name is Severio. Then his father was Carlo, his name was Severio, and we broke the tradition when we have Americanized names, but, like, I
Well,
named my son Severio after my grandfather, you know.
my brother was supposed to be Ubaldo. That was my my father's father. Uh, and since my brother was the first son, he was. My mother said, "I love you dearly, but we're in America. I can't name my son." So he's John. uh, and I don't know where Robert came from. They didn't do the traditions, but certainly all my grandparents, a lot of my older aunts and uncles all follow you. We have a lot of Luigi's and Francesco's in my family. That was the name, you know. Um, well, listen, Chris, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you taking the time. I could talk about this for hours and days,
I
but
know. Well, we'll have to get together and do something. I've gone in front of the association at the meetings, and just just to even, tell everybody, like, write down your information, write down everything you know, even if you're not interested, someday someone might be interested. And once that information gets lost, it gets harder to find, there's always somebody somewhere in the family that gets interested in, in what the history is, so I always implore people, like, write down what you know, tell everybody what you know. This way, everybody has that information, you know.
Well, yeah, and the big advantage that we have now is, if your grandparents are still around, or older aunts or uncles or something like that, tape them, you know, get it on video if they're willing to do it.
Yeah.
And then you could go back and save it, or even now you could put that stuff on ancestry and everything if you want to do that.
Mhm.
All right, well, I'll see you at the club.